Well, good evening and welcome into the Toasted Tavern. Michael Wagon Connect alongside Scott Tobin for another edition of the best show in the Midwest that's on the computer and not the radio. I didn't want to step on any 101 toes. We had Anthony Stalter on last week. We know where they sit. We know where KMOX sits, but we also know our spot on the internet as well. Scott, how are you doing, man? It's been a week. It's been a surprisingly long week. I don't understand why it feels that way. Maybe because it started off with the trade deadline and a couple of good Cardinal wins, and then we went to Chicago and kind of did what we did, which is suck the first two games and then somehow came away with a victory yesterday and maybe find a way to win tonight as well. But it sure has felt like it dragged on. Maybe it was the heat too. I think we hit triple digits a couple of times this week.
Yeah, the heat definitely didn't help, and I'm obviously having some technical issues here. So hang on just a second. Hopefully we'll be back together and with you. But yeah, man, not a bad week at all. Like you said, it's been a little long. We had all the craziness of the trade deadline and when everything went on with that, and the weather and everything. But it's the 1st of August, and we're in the dog days of summer right now, my friend. So we'll see how things go from here on out.
Yeah, it's essentially the playoff stretch now. I mean, usually it was, mid-August, that stretch, August into September was where things really started to get going. But ever since the addition of that extra wild card and the way the trade deadline is situated, it almost feels like once that deadline passes, the teams that are in it are going for it now. And you have to stretch out your mindset of, okay, every game now is a playoff game. And especially in the NL Central, where first to last is within six and a half games of each other. And the fact that the Brewers continue to give away games, it really makes it that much more important for teams in the Central to win their games when they can, especially against divisional opponents. But for the Cardinals, it's most important because they're sitting in second place right now, barely holding off the Pirates. And with the moves that they made at the deadline, they have to win if fans are going to continue to put their weight behind this team going into the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, like we talked about, it's going to be super competitive down the stretch. It doesn't seem like anybody wants to run away with anything, not just in the Central, but in the National League in general, as you look at the standings and look what's going on. So, yeah, like you said, you just got to win and keep fighting. And the Cardinals have done that for the most part. I mean, they've kind of had an up and down week to a certain extent. But overall, they're right there in the hunt. And if they find a way to win tonight, they're 4.5 games out of first and 2 games out of the wild card. And you've got a big game with the Mets tomorrow. So, you're right in that stretch, man, where everything's really going to pick up. Because if you look at the Cardinals' schedule as you move into the middle of August, it's make or break time the last 2.5 weeks of August, because you play pretty much everybody that's in the playoff hunt in both the National and the American League for about 21 days straight.
Yeah, I think I saw something today, like 28 of the next 31 or something like that are against teams with winning records. So, I mean, it literally is the dog days of summer. And, you need your leaders to step up and not just, offensively, defensively, but also in the clubhouse as well. And we're starting to see a little bit of that with some of the veterans, especially the Paul Goldschmidts, who are starting to get hot right now. We saw the day before the trade deadline, a little bit of inconsistency, I think, with the team, because obviously it's the day before the deadline, so you don't know, who's going, who's staying, all that kind of stuff. But then after that, they really kind of took advantage of the Texas Rangers, and you had everybody essentially hitting in that series the last 2 games, especially against Max. I mean, Mason Wynn, took the first pitch you saw against Mad Max and put it over the fence. So you look at it, you go, now that you're past the trade deadline, this is the moment where your veteran leaders need to step up. And there's questions. I wanted to ask Stalter this last week, but it never really kind of materialized. But you're down at the ballpark a lot, and you kind of see not only what goes on the field, you see a little bit of the behind-the-scenes stuff. You see a little bit about what the fans see as well. I want to talk a little bit about what the perception of Nolan Arenado is right now, because, yes, it's the internet, and you can't believe or take credit or anything for what goes on the internet as far as, what's right and what's wrong. But there's been a lot of grumbling about the effort that he has been putting in right now. And I get it's a long season, and he struggled a little bit offensively. But have you seen anything along those lines that makes you sit there and question, is he going to, step up and help this team push forward?
I don't have any questions about Nolan's intensity or his will to win or anything like that. I'll admit there have been some games where you've seen him hit balls on the infield, ground balls to a shortstop, to the third baseman, where it doesn't look like he's running hard. But how many times did we hear people complain about Albert and Yachty? Those exact same things. There's certain times when your superstar is not going to bust it, and there could be something ailing him that we don't know about, where maybe he's been told by management, on a ground ball that you're not going to beat out, don't go all out, don't re-injure yourself. I've said all year I think there's something wrong with Nolan. I don't think he's 100% healthy. But I think he's still putting everything he has into it, and we've seen him come up with some big hits in this second half already. There have been 2 or 3 games where he's come up with the winning hit. He did it yesterday, although it was a little bit wind aided yesterday, but he still got the hit that won the game. He hit a nice double early in this game here tonight, and we've seen him make more Nolan Arenado type plays at third base in the last couple of weeks. His defense has been more consistent, so I don't have any questions. And fans. He's not putting up the 35 home runs that you expect Nolan Arenado to put up. And so fans want to get on him for that and say, he's not living up to that contract. But at the same time, I think he's doing everything he can. And I don't think anybody's more frustrated when he doesn't come through than Nolan is. And so, I've heard that from the clubhouse. When Nolan's struggling, he's not the easiest guy to be around because he takes it so seriously, that he's not in a very happy mood when he's not playing well. And so I think he puts it all out there, and and I think fans just sometimes have too high of expectations. You can't bust out every play, every ground ball on 162 games, or they're going to wear themselves into the ground on some occasions. Not saying I don't want the guys to hustle, but there's sometimes where there's no point, honestly.
Well, and that's exactly the answer I wanted to draw out of you, was the behind the scenes stuff that the fans don't know about. We don't know what the conversations are between the trainers and the leadership there and the players, and between management and the players and all that stuff. We don't know. And 9 times out of 10, when you see this happen in any sport, in any level, at the end of the season, something will come out where, oh yeah, this guy had to have surgery after the season to fix this. Well, that explains it. And that's the problem with fandom, in a sense, is we all get so wrapped up in the moments of it. And there are moments where you go, yeah, maybe you can be a little critical and a little hard on the players because they are out there, getting paid to do what they're supposed to do. But I also think that we have to remember that they're human beings, and there are things that go on that we don't know about because, A, if it's disclosed, it could potentially hurt the team or the player because an opponent can go after it in a certain way. Or B, it's just something that doesn't need to be out there because he's just out there gritting through it. I mean, yeah, it'd be great. It'd be great if, you could sit there and say, oh yeah, well, Nolan's dealing with, a tender groin this year. It's been bothering him all year. It's, we're telling him not to run things out if it's not, imperative that he does it. And then people go, oh yeah, I mean, he's grinding it out. He's gutting it out. That's awesome. We can live with that. But they're not going to do that because that gives information to other teams about what this guy's doing or how they're feeling. So that's the thing I think fans need to understand is that, yeah, there are moments that you can be critical and hard on these players, but until you know the full story, you can't go crazy on these guys.
No, you can't. And like you said, there's just a lot that it's not like football where, every little injury is reported and there's an injury report for baseball. Football obviously does it because of betting lines and those types of things. Baseball doesn't worry about that as much, and you don't hear those little things, and they try to keep a lot of that stuff in-house. So, in this time of the year, everybody's ailing a little bit. None of those guys are 100% right now. And so, like we said, we don't know what he's dealing with, but like I said, I have no doubt that Nolan's not putting 100% effort in doing everything he can to help this team win.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And like you said, he had a big double tonight. He's 1 for 2 so far in the game against the Cubs. 2-0 lead for the Cardinals. Makes him win a 2-run home run. So after the first 2 games against the Cubs, were you sitting there questioning the deadline moves and if this team had any a chance of getting into the playoffs? Because it was a blown game on Thursday that, Ryan Helsley came in, and we'll talk about that in a second. And again, going back to the criticalness of fans, but comes in, Cubs did everything right to come back in that game and win it. And then, Friday, the debut of Eric Fetty, not what you would expect, although a 5-run inning at Wrigley Field, it's going to happen. I think that's going to happen to the best of the best too. So, I mean, you can't really sit there and hang your hat on, oh, he's going to be terrible for us. But then they bounced back, kind of gave them, the Cubs a little bit of their own medicine on Saturday. But, what was your feel, Thursday night, Friday morning, and Friday night after those first two games going, oh, no, did we not do enough?
No, not really. I mean, Thursday night was disappointing, especially after, you get the Wynn hits the home run to put you ahead, and then Nolan gets the big hit in the top of the ninth inning to put you up by 2, and you're feeling pretty good about it. And then, Ryan came out and had a bad game. Like you said, we'll go into that a little bit deeper here in a few minutes. But, he's had 3 of those this year. So you just kind of shake your head and say it's going to happen every once in a while that your closer has an off night. Unfortunately, it happened Friday night or Thursday night. Friday, the Eric Fetty game, you look at that line score and you go, oh, man, he gave up 5 runs. But it all happened to him in the second inning. He had a 1-2-3 first. He had a bad second. And then he retired the last 10 guys he faced, third, fourth, fifth. So, one of those home runs was windblown. You look at it and you say, first game he was pitching in Chicago, probably trying to do a little too much, maybe trying to impress his new club. But then he settled down, got through it, kept him in the game. It could have gotten away from him when it's 5-0, and he didn't. And so you just say, you shake it off and say, okay, let's see how he looks when he pitches at Busch this week. And then the game yesterday, you have to give Kyle Gibson all the credit in the world because Gibson comes out, has a good first inning, goes out in the second, doesn't have a good second inning, gives up 4 runs. But then again, he settles down and gives up 1 hit through the next 5 innings and gets you through 7 innings. And, we've seen Kyle Gibson do that all year. I mean, Kyle Gibson doesn't get enough credit for what he's done for this ball club this year because he may have 1 bad inning, but then he'll go out and shut him down for the rest of the game and keep you in the ball game. And that's exactly what he did last night. He kept you in the ball game, and this team found a way to fight back and eventually win the game. And, they got a couple of breaks last night, just like the Cubs did on Thursday. So, it kind of evens out, and then you go into today and see what happens. I mean, I will say yesterday when it was 4-0 after they lost those first 2 games and they weren't hitting at all, I'm sitting there going, oh man, are they going to get swept by the Cubs? Are we going to be 7 games out of first place? And then I would have had questions. I was starting to get a little bit nervous during that game yesterday, middle innings. I'm not going to lie, but looking back on it, it's a typical Cubs-Cardinals weekend in Chicago. And if you come out of that with a split, I think that's the best you can ask for. I mean, it's hard to win 3 out of 4 or sweep the Cubs in Chicago. And if you win tonight, you split 2 series in Chicago and you won 1. And so, you had a good series in Chicago. You won the season series against the Cubs and you move on. And that's kind of what you want to do in these rivalry series.
And then Blake Snell goes out and throws a no-hitter, and Cardinals fans are wringing their hands about that one. But that's a whole different story.
I mean, you can say, oh man, well, why didn't we get? Well, nobody got Blake Snell because the Giants didn't make him available. So it's not like the Cardinals didn't. It would have been one thing if he would have gotten traded, and somebody would have traded him for nothing, and he'd gone to a new team and throw a new hitter. But he didn't. He stayed with the Giants and he threw a no hitter, and the Giants didn't make him available. So I mean, Cardinal fans can whine and complain and say, oh, they should have done more, but they went and got the best guy that was available, honestly, at the trade deadline because. Garrett Crochet was not available because of his own mouth, basically, that made him unavailable, and he's going to regret that decision for a while, I believe. And then, like I said, the Giants didn't make Snell available. The Rangers didn't make Eovaldi or Scherzer available. Scherzer's on the disabled list now, so we're probably lucky that didn't happen, and he actually got hurt during the Cardinal game that he pitched on Wednesday night. But, Rangers are probably kind of wishing they would have traded Nathan Eovaldi because they've lost 5 in a row now since the trade deadline. So, yeah, it's could they have done? Do you wish they would have done something else? Yeah, I mean, you wish there would have been a number 2 out there, but there wasn't, and so you went and got Eric Fetty, and I think over the course of this year and next year, you're going to be happy with him because I think he is probably a low number 2, high number 3 type pitcher that's going to make your rotation better for the next year and a half.
And we'll talk about the other deals that went down in Major League Baseball, teams that maybe helped themselves out to get themselves into a better spot in the playoffs. But we'll get to that a little bit later. Let's talk a little bit about the Ryan Helsley game on Thursday. 34 saves leads Major League Baseball, okay? He's going to blow a save here and there, especially with the way that the Cubs were able to hit him on Thursday night. It's not like Helsley pitched poorly in that game. And I think that's what a lot of people are missing is that there's some games where a team is going to hit somebody. And I don't know what it is. And I've said this before, but there's just something about the mystique of Wrigley Field when the Cardinals are there that things that don't normally go wrong for the Cardinals at Wrigley Field. I'm not. I know they win games there. I know they take series. I know they have big moments there. But it feels like the games that they lose are the ones where you sit back and you go, how did that happen? And that's exactly what happened on Thursday. Because, like you said, they did everything right. They took the lead late. The guys that needed to get hits got hits. And you had your major league leading all-star closer come in to finish the game out, and it just didn't get done. And again, I think fans need to recognize that you said it 3 times this year. He's blown a save or lost a game. I think actually it was his first loss of the year, but 3 out of how many chances? He's got 34 saves. I mean, go look at the statistics for the top closers in the last 5 to 7 years. Really, ever since Mariano Rivera retired, go look at the numbers for closers. I bet you his conversion percentage is one of the best, if not the best, in Major League Baseball in that time. And you're going to get upset over one game because it's against your rival.
Yeah, and the thing that people aren't looking at, that was only the 5th time Helsley pitched in 25 days. So there's a little part of that he probably wasn't sharp, or maybe he was a little too sharp because he had all that rest. That's a long time for a closer to not work very much. So you have that to look at. And then you have to look at the fact that for whatever reason, the Cubs have hit him pretty hard all season long. He's closed most of the games, but, they've scored a run against him, I think, in every appearance he's had against the Cubs this year. And they've hit the ball hard against him. But, he had been able to get the saves anyway up until Thursday night. And, things just didn't go well. And even that winning hit, that ball was fair by what, 1.5 feet down the left field line, another foot, and it's a foul ball, and it's a different story. So, you just move past it. And, if your closer is only blowing 3 games a year, you got to feel pretty good about that. I mean, I know Cardinal fans want to rip Brian Helsley, and, a lot of Cardinal fans wanted to trade him at the deadline, which I don't totally understand what we're talking about. But, yeah, I mean, you can't complain with what he's done because he's been pretty impressive for the most part for the last year was a struggle for him because he wasn't healthy. But you go back 2 years ago, he was probably one of the best closers in the National League. And, people are going to say, well, he blew a playoff game. But you got to remember that he pitched that game after he'd hurt his finger. And, he didn't really have a feel for the ball. He probably shouldn't have been in that game, honestly. That was kind of a rookie mistake by our manager who left him out there too long on a game when he just didn't have a feel for the ball. But I mean, you look at that season, and he was really, really dominant that year too. So, I mean, he is one of the better closers in baseball when he's healthy. And, you wouldn't be where you are right now if it wasn't for Ryan Helsley.
Well, here again, here's the mystique of Cubs, Cardinals, all of that stuff. You just mentioned, you're pretty sure that he's given up a run every time that he's faced the Cubs this year. June 14th and June 16th pitched 2 clean innings. So none there. July 13th. Did not give up a run. And then yesterday didn't give up a run. So he actually, I mean, again, 4 of the, 4 of the 7 or 4 of the 8 games, he's had clean innings. So again, there's that mystique there of the Cards-Cubs rivalry and series is that makes you think things happen against the Cardinals so many times, but then you actually look at it and they're actually have done pretty well. Now, granted, he has given up a lot of walks in those appearances still, and that's the one thing that makes me think he's very, very similar to Jason Isringhausen. If you remember back in the day, Izzy was dominant, but he made things interesting. Ryan Franklin made things interesting. There's been a couple of closers that have been here in St. Louis where they're absolutely amazing when they're here, but then they'll walk the bases loaded with no outs and still find a way to get a save just to make it interesting. Ryan Helsley has that same feel to me where he is very, very good, but he does still put runners on the base paths, and he just is good enough to get away with those mistakes. Do you feel that way too, where maybe, he's got a little bit of that Izzy, that Franklin, that type of closer, pedigree?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of great closers that have been like that through the years that, runners get on base, but then they get out of it. And, people have complained about that with Cardinal closers for as long as I can remember. Going back to being a little kid with Bruce Sutter to Todd Worrell to Lee Smith to Dennis Eckersley to Tom Hinkie to pretty much every closer that every great closer that the Cardinals have had, and you throw out Izzy, who's, a Cardinal Hall of Famer, and Trevor Rosenthal, who was amazing, and unfortunately, injuries shortened his career in his stint in St. Louis. But, those guys were all good. But, yeah, they did put runners on base. But, that's what makes closers a different breed is they can do that. And then they have that ice water in their veins that it doesn't seem to phase them. And they can load the bases and then throw 3 balls right down the middle and strike a guy out. And you're like, yeah, this guy's amazing.
It also helps that a couple of those guys could throw, triple digits as well, and
absolutely.
it's hard to catch up to those sometimes. Although with the more triple digit pitchers we're having in the league, it not saying that the hitters have caught up, but because you're seeing it more frequently, it's maybe not as dominant as it was when it was kind of a new thing. And I mean, again, it's still so hard to hit 100+ mile-an-hour fastball, especially one that may have movement. But again, we're starting to see it a little bit more frequently. Do you feel like hitters are starting to catch up just a little bit, or you still feel like the pitchers still have that edge, especially if they have movement on that ball?
Well, it comes down to movement because hitters are going to – you keep seeing 100-mile-an-hour fastball. Hitters are going to time it. We see it all the time. You got to have movement, and then you've got to have another pitch, and that's what makes – Helsley so dominant. And, a lot of times when you think about Helsley getting strikeouts, it's not on his 100-mile-an-hour fastball. It's that nasty slider that he has that, I mean, is almost unfair when he goes 101 and then he drops the slider at 89 at your feet. There's not a whole lot you're going to be able to do because you're all geared up for that fastball. So, you've got to have a couple of pitches, which he definitely does because, you can throw 105, but if a hitter sees it enough and you don't have a ton of movement, they're going to time that at some point.
All right, let's talk a little bit about Mason Wynn. We already said that he hit the 2-run home run tonight. It's a 2-2 game in the top of the 5th, Cardinals and Cubs. We were talking a little bit before we came on about, Mason Wynn and if the questions that were around him at the start of the season as far as is he ready? Would he be productive at the major league level? I feel like those questions have, for the most part, been answered. But you brought up a really good point before we came on air, and the fact that, over the last week and a half, maybe 2 weeks or so, his propensity for trying to hit the long ball has grown, and some of the things that he said has led you to believe that mindset is there, where it's home run or bust. And we've seen that to an extent. In this 4-game series against the Cubs, he has 5 hits, and 2 of them are home runs. And, he is 2, 4, 5 for 17 in this series. So, it's not great. He's had no, before this Cubs series against Washington and Texas, he had 1 game where he had multiple hits. In the month of July, he had a handful of multi-hit games. Otherwise, it was 1 hit or less. With what you're hearing coming out of his mouth and kind of the things that we saw with Jordan Walker last year, is there any concern in your mind that this could hurt him as far as the rest of the season goes on, and if that could take him out of the running for National League Rookie of the Year?
I don't know if it's going to hurt him as far as that aspect because, baseball loves home runs. That's what everybody wants to talk about is slug, slug, slug. I don't know that it's necessarily what the Cardinals need, though, especially if he's your leadoff hitter. You want him to get on base and create things. You think about when this offense was really rolling a couple of weeks ago, he was getting hits. He was getting multi-hit game, him and Burleson. And that's kind of gone away as Burleson's kind of regressed the last 2 or 3 weeks. And then the only hits he's getting right now are home runs. And Burleson's like 5 for his last 40-something, and 4 of those hits are home runs. So you have to look at that and say, man, we need to go back to just making contact and trying to get on base, especially from your leadoff hitter. Mason's not drawing a whole lot of walks right now. I mean, he's not drawing any walks right now, honestly, which is something, that hurts your on base percentage, which is something, you want him to be able to get on base and you want some pop in that lineup, but you also want him to be able to get on base and be there for Goldschmidt and Arenado and Wynn Burleson and Contreras and those guys in the middle of the lineup to drive him home. So you don't want the guy batting leadoff up there just thinking home run or bust. So, that's something you have to look at and say, maybe dial that down a little bit. Although, like we said before we came on the show, it seems like the Cardinals are all about slug, baby, slug. So, maybe that's what the team's telling him, which, again, I'm not that crazy about because we've seen him be a really good contact hitter and use all fields and be able to use that 2-strike approach and just slap the ball the other way. So you hope he doesn't get away from that because he's been one of the best hitters in baseball with 2 strikes and doing that. So hopefully he doesn't change his mindset too much. Real quick, you brought up Jordan Walker, and I'm just going to throw this out there because I know there was a lot of people upset because if you haven't seen it, Michael Ciani went on the disabled list today with an oblique injury, and it doesn't sound good. It sounds like he's going to miss quite a bit of time. It sounds like a pretty severe injury. And the Cardinals decided to bring up Victor Scott. And, of course, people on social media outrage, oh, my God, they're not bringing up Jordan Walker. They're ruining Jordan Walker. Why isn't Jordan? Well, here's the thing. You needed a center fielder. The only guy you have on the team at this point that can really play center field, and he's not really that great at it, is Lars Nootbaar. I mean, I guess Tommy Pham could play center field if he needed to. I don't really know when the last time Tommy played center. He's 37 at this point. I don't know that you want to stick him in center field a whole lot. So you needed another guy that could be that speed guy and be the elite center fielder. And Victor Scott is that defensively. Will he be able to hit up here? I don't know, but I don't know how much he's going to hit. I can see him being more of a defensive replacement and a base runner at this point, if nothing else. But, for people that are clamoring for Jordan Walker and not understanding why Jordan Walker was up here and, oh my God, they're ruining Jordan Walker and the Cardinals are going to trade Jordan. You had to bring a guy up here that could play center field, and Walker can't do that.
Oh yeah, no, he can't. And Scott's been actually kind of hot at the plate for the last couple of weeks as well. He's got, I believe, 4 home runs in the last week, including a grand slam. So he is, and again, that's AAA versus Major League. That there's the transition is definitely steep there, but he is having success at the plate, which having to start the season up here at the Major League level and struggling right off the bat doesn't help your mindset. If you can come up on a hot streak down there, it doesn't feel as ominous to come up and face Major League pitching and go, oh man, am I good enough? Because, he has shown that, at AAA level, he can hit. Now it's just a matter of taking that and translating it to how he approaches at-bats here at the Major League level as well. But as you said, you probably won't see very many at-bats. It's more about the defensive replacements. It's more about getting that speed out there. And that's something that the Cardinals early on the season kind of used to their advantage. Haven't really seen that a whole lot the last month or so as far as, really utilizing the speed, because they haven't really had a whole lot of speed out there. I mean, Ciani has really been the guy that's, driven the speed angle of the game. Obviously now he's out, but if you can get a Scott up there, and, Nootbaar's sneaky fast as well. So I'm just interested to see if they have a way of reintegrating the speed and the small ball aspect of the game that helped win them games early on in the season.
Well, and you would hope that's what Scott's able to do. You hope that he went down and worked on bunting a little bit, hitting the ball on the ground a little more, because we saw that was his big issue when he was up here early in the season, was the fly balls, hitting the ball in the air too much. So hopefully he can get back to that and do some things on the ground and use that speed. And you brought up Lars Nootbaar. Talk about a guy who's been a disappointment this year. I mean, I hate to be like that because everybody loves Lars Nootbaar. But, I mean, the guy's hitting 236. He's got 7 home runs. He's got 23 RBIs. Think about this for a second. He came off the disabled list the first weekend in July against the Nationals in Washington, the 4th of July weekend. Since he came back, we're in August now. He has 2 home runs and 3 RBIs in that month.
Not good enough.
And you brought up the fact that the speed, he has 4 stolen base. He gets on base and he doesn't run. You talk about not showing any hustle, and there was some talk about this at Busch Stadium the other night. He was on second base. The guy hit a ball into right center field, and instead of scoring, he basically walked to third base.
I don't understand it. I just don't get it. I mean, what? What? I mean, come on. I'm speechless, to be honest, but and
hopefully he figures it. And hopefully he figures it out, because he's got a lot of potential, and we saw a lot of in him a couple of years ago. The Newt mania that went on, but he really hasn't been that same player. Last year he was hurt all year, but we don't see that excitement. We don't see the stuff that we saw a couple of years ago, and we haven't for a couple of years, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, the most excitement I saw from him was right after he came back from the injury, and he was sitting on top of the dugout, went crazy, and fell off and kind of re-injured himself. I mean, that's the only time I've seen him, produce any excitement, and then he got himself hurt again.
Yeah, it's been a disappointing couple of years. Hopefully, they need him to be productive, especially with Ciani out and him probably having to play center field the majority of the time for a while. So hopefully he can figure it out and he can be a force in that lineup because they need that.
Yeah, they certainly do. I mean, Tommy Pham has put a spark into this team a little bit, but he's not going to be that way for the rest of the season. So we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. We'll talk a little bit more about the deals that were done, not just for the Cardinals, but for the Royals and for the rest of Major League Baseball, for teams that are really trying to make a push for a postseason berth and a run at a championship. So we'll be right back here on the Toasted Tavern. Back here on the Toasted Tavern, talking Major League Baseball trade deadline. It was last Tuesday. It actually kind of got started about 4 or 5 days before the actual deadline. You started to see guys making moves and trading, changing teams and all of that. And honestly, I wouldn't say that there were a ton of blockbuster deals. I mean, this is not the mid 2000s, early 2000s trade deadline that came around at midnight and you saw just massive names going left and right to teams, because so many teams are still in contention. And instead of making those big blockbuster moves, you're really starting to see a lot of strategic moves. And lots of players got moved. Teams solidified their positions, gave themselves a chance to move up in the standings. And for you, Scott, I mean, looking at who was moved, was there one move that kind of stood out that makes you go, yeah, that team nailed it, and they got a good chance of making a deep run?
And there really wasn't that one big move. There were some teams that made multiple moves. I really liked what the Orioles did, improving their starting rotation and their bullpen. I think they were smart. I like what the Cardinals did. I think the Cardinals addressed their needs with the starter, the bench bat, and then the bullpen arm that everybody was like, oh my God, they traded Dylan Carlson for who? But Armstrong's thrown 3 innings now for the Cardinals and has looked pretty good when he's been out there. So, that's just another piece. You got the 3 things that you said you needed. So that's really good. I mean, like you said, so many teams made moves to bolster things. The Dodgers going out. The Dodgers, I think, were the most interesting team. I'm not really sure if they made themselves better or not. You went out and you got Kiermaier as an outfielder for your ball club. You went and traded for Tommy Edman, who hasn't played all year, and nobody really knows when he's going to play. I've heard that they're circling when the Dodgers come to St. Louis that maybe they'll activate him for that series, which would be interesting. They went out and got Jack Flaherty, which, there's questions about that move because apparently the Yankees backed out of a deal for Flaherty because of his injury report. So there are moves like that they made that are kind of interesting. The Padres made some moves, added to their bullpen, tried to make themselves stronger. There were a bunch of moves. We saw a bunch of Cardinal outfielders get moved, former outfielders. Randy Arozarena went to Seattle. Lane Thomas went to Cleveland. We saw Dylan Carlson go to Tampa and hit a home run in his first game. First home run in over a year, actually. So, you saw some interesting moves. You saw some teams buy and sell. The Cubs did some stuff that I don't really totally understand what they were doing. The Reds made a couple of moves that were interesting. The Brewers gave up a lot for a guy like Frankie Montas, and traded guys in the division. They traded for Montas, and they gave up a couple of young players to the Reds that might come back and bite them in the next couple of years. I like what the Pirates did. The Pirates were aggressive and said, you know what? We've got some pitching. This thing's crazy. We're going to make a run at it. So, yeah, I think there were some teams that made some moves to really improve themselves. Like you said, there really wasn't that blockbuster. Like we said, Nathan Eovaldi's name was out there. Garrett Crochet's name was out there. Blake Snell's name was out there. Vladdy Guerrero's name was out there. None of those guys moved. I think Crochet probably would have had it not been for the comments that him and his agent made a week before the trade deadline that, why you would do that right before the trade deadline, I don't understand. You cost yourself the opportunity to play for a contender, to get out of Chicago, because, Chicago's probably going to set the record for the worst record in the history of baseball this year. Yeah. That's pretty hard to do. Major League Baseball has been going on for 150 years, 160 years, and you're going to have the worst record ever.
They just lost the 20th in a row. So
yeah, you had a chance to get out of there. You had a chance to go to a contender and pitch in the postseason, and instead you said, no, I'm not going I'm not pitching unless I get an extension. It makes you wonder, okay, is this a guy you even want on your team? Because does he care about winning? Is it just all about trying to make money? So I think that's a huge issue there. You know, like you said, there were no blockbusters, but I think quite probably the age of the blockbuster trade at the trade deadline might be over because of the fact that you have so many more teams getting into the postseason now than there used to be. It used to be three teams, then it was four teams, now it's 12 teams out of the 30 that get in. So a lot of teams are in it till the very end, and they're not going to trade those guys. And I think those big trade deadline blockbuster moves are going to happen less and less frequently over the years.
So here's the next question. Then, does it ever enter your mind to push the trade deadline back anymore?
I heard somebody else bring that up, and they're like, "Oh, I think it would make." But if you're the team trading, okay, now if you're going for a rental, are you going to trade for a rental if you're only going to have the guy for, instead of 50 games, say you're only going to have the guy for 30 games to try to get in the postseason? Is it really worth it at that point? If I'm a team, I'm going to say, man, I'm not doing that for 30 games if he's a rental. So I think, while some people think it may make it more competitive, I think you'd see less big trades because I think teams would be less motivated to go out and get a guy for a handful of games if they're not going to have control for another season after that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, it feels like, it almost feels like the teams that are trading the players might actually even be able to push for a little bit more too, just because, they know that the avenue of teams that are interested would be smaller. So you can kind of pit teams against each other as well. But to your point, if you're only going to have the guy for 30 games and, maybe a playoff series, is it worth it to give up some of the young guys? So on the flip side, more teams may be out of it at that point. So it may go back to some sort of the classic, hey, let's dump some of these guys. But I think I'm with you as well. I don't think pushing it back is, the thing that you need to do to create excitement around it. I think what they've got now is fine. You just have to change your mindset of what you believe the trade deadline is. Now, I still hate the fact that they took it, from midnight and moved it to, 5 Central. I mean, come on. I mean, it's the summer. Who doesn't love staying up till midnight trying to see what big trade drops? But I get it though, because big trades aren't happening as much anymore. No one's going to stay up till midnight, and baseball tonight, nowhere near what it was back in the heyday when I was in high school, staying up late in the summer watching the trade deadline specials. It is a far cry from what it was back then.
Yeah, MLB or ESPN's baseball coverage has definitely not the same as it was when you had Joe Morgan and John Miller and Chris Berman and Peter Gammons and all those guys doing it. It's definitely gone downhill. And we were talking about it before the game tonight. I barely watch ESPN at all anymore. ESPN used to be must-see TV, and it was on in my house pretty much in the background 24/7, and I barely ever turn ESPN on anymore, honestly. And,
I don't either.
Yeah, and for my baseball stuff, I go to MLB Network because you can't beat St. Louis's very own Greg Amsinger and the guys that do the stuff on MLB, because they do an amazing job, including our friends Albert Pujols and Adam Wainwright, who do a lot of stuff.
They do, yeah, they do. And Lindenwood graduate Greg Amsinger, so another local product.
Right, absolutely, got to throw that in there.
Well, looking at the Cards-Cubs game right now, end of 5, Cubs holding a 4-2 lead. They picked up a couple runs in the 5th inning, knocked out Miles Michaelis. He went 8 hits, 4 earned, 2 walks, and 3 strikeouts. So again, the Cardinals are going to have to find a way to potentially come back against the Cubs to even this series out before they come back home. And they are coming back home to play the Mets tomorrow in a makeup game, and then 3 games against the Tampa Bay Rays. And we're not going to really talk about the games. I kind of want to transition to a poll that was just done recently that was out on Arch City Media yesterday, and something you sent over. And it was an intriguing one because of where, some places ended up, and kind of the breakdown of who was in it and who was not. So there was a poll done about the best stadiums in Major League Baseball, NBA, and NFL cities, in a sense. And they ranked 90 facilities. Now, mind you, the NHL wasn't a part of this. The MLS was not a part of this, which I get it. They're both niche sports, but I'll be honest. I think if you would have had City Park in there, it would have cracked the top 25 at the very least because of the atmosphere. But 90 different venues were ranked in this poll, and there were a couple of surprises on there. Busch Stadium, though, came in at number 4. Only 3 venues ahead of them. Camden Yards at 3, PNC Park at 2, and Lambeau Field at number 1. Busch was ahead of Fenway Park, Wrigley Field, and a couple of other big time venues. So, looking at that, first off, looking at the Busch Stadium ranking, what do you say to that? I mean, you work there, so you get the atmosphere.
Yeah, and I see it all the time because fans come in from all over the country, all over the world, and almost verbatim, I hear from those fans that it's the most beautiful ballpark, the skyline with the arch and everything. They think it's the best thing best ballpark they've ever seen. I hear that all the time, that it's better than, I hear it all the time, that it's better than Pittsburgh, that it's better than San Francisco, and so that doesn't surprise me. To come in fourth is pretty impressive with 90 different parks of all the sports. I've been to Camden Yards and I've been to Pittsburgh, so I've seen both of those ballparks, and they are both beautiful, and so I can understand them coming in ahead of it, but to come in fourth is pretty impressive, and it just shows, again, what a first-class organization the Cardinals are and what a job they've done with the stadium and ballpark village and everything surrounding it, which went into all of that.
So you've got that, and again, you're ahead of the legacy parks in Fenway and Wrigley. You're ahead of other places. Citizens Bank Ballpark is up there. Lucas Oil Stadium, Citi Field, Comerica Park. A lot of baseball stadiums in the top 25. The one that really surprised me, though, was the one that came in at number 9, just behind Wrigley Field, Kaseya Center in Miami. The Miami Heat, the NBA arena, was the 9th best venue in the country for those 3 sports. And we all know we don't cover the NBA as much as we possibly could, obviously, because we don't have a team here. But a little surprised that an NBA arena would crack the top 10 as one of the best places to catch a game.
Yeah, a little bit, but it's Miami, it's South Beach. I'm sure it's everything that's around it, and the amenities and everything go into that. So yeah, that's impressive though that they were 9th.
And looking at a couple of the other stadiums that are in the state of Missouri, Kauffman Stadium, home of the Royals, came in at number 33. It's an older venue. Obviously, they're talking about building a new stadium, building a downtown stadium. So it is going to be a little bit lower in the rankings. Still 33, pretty good for Kauffman Stadium. It's got to be the fountains, and it's got to be what Kurt Nelson's done with the Hall of Fame, right?
I would think so.
And here's the surprise. This is the one that kind of was like, okay. Arrowhead Stadium came in at 38.
Yeah. Well, when you think about it, though, there's nothing around it. It's just it and coffee. For a football stadium, there's no ballpark village. There's no restaurants or bars around. I mean, it's perfect for tailgating. But other than that, I mean, there isn't anything really close. You and I have been there. It's a pretty stadium. There's no question about that. And the atmosphere in the stadium. But for all of those other things, there just aren't any of those around, which is part of the reason why them and the Royals are both talking about relocating.
Well, and you've seen because of what Camden Yards has around their stadium, what the Cardinals have around Busch Stadium, and what a few of these other venues have done. They've seen what having more infrastructure around these arenas and stadiums will do, and exactly why those 2 teams are looking to make the upgrades. Yankee Stadium at 37. Again, doesn't have the same gravitas as old Yankee Stadium has. But again, still a little surprised that it's kind of, mid rankings, considering, you've got some football fields ahead of them, but a little surprised about that too, being in at number 37.
Yeah, a little surprising. Like you said, though, it's not the same as old Yankee Stadium. I've heard people say there's nothing really all that special about the new one. So have not had the opportunity to be there. So I can't say for sure.
And here's the other 3 kind of big surprises, I guess, not surprises. Well, who do you believe are the 89th and 90th venues on this list? Just take a wild stab. I bet you get one of them.
Oh man, I don't. Off the top of my head, I do not have any idea. Probably Tampa Bay, the Rays Stadium. I would throw out there, and the Oakland Coliseum.
Oakland Coliseum, number 89. All right, so you got that, and then looking at I had it. Hold on, Miami Lone Depot Park is 63. Where are the Rays at on here? Tropicana is actually at 80. So number 90, Commanders Field.
Wow. In Washington. That's a little surprising.
Well, here's an even bigger one. A pretty much brand new stadium at number 88, Allegiant Stadium for the Raiders.
Wow. Yeah, that is surprising.
And
Wonder
just
why,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
no, I wonder why Allegiant Stadium in Vegas would be that low.
Yeah, I mean, I got to look and see what the particulars were on how this poll was conducted, because that is a little surprise. But good news for St. Louis fans. Great news for St. Louis fans. SoFi Stadium came in at 85. So, again, we beat the Rams, and we don't even have a football team anymore outside of the Battlehawks, which is still better than the Rams.
You mean Stan's Palace isn't ranked number 1? I'm shocked.
It is not ranked number 1 at all, which is absolutely phenomenal. I love the fact that, again, it just keeps getting, knocked down.
Yeah, you can't go. Anytime Stan gets knocked down, you have to smile.
Oh, yes, 100%. And I'm trying to take a quick gander and see. Here you go. So the stadiums are ranked by average review rating on Yelp, Google, TripAdvisor, and Facebook. So really no real particulars as far as how they were ranked, more so just on the average review, which just goes to show you that, it's all about the atmosphere that's created, the things that go on around these stadiums, and it also probably has to deal a little bit with winning teams as well. I mean, the Commanders haven't been winners, the A's obviously haven't been winners, and there's talks of them, they're moving to Vegas as well. The Raiders haven't been a winning team since they've gone to Vegas, but maybe they're turning that around. The real surprise, Levi's Stadium at 87. 49ers have been a winning franchise for a long time. That's got to be placement where it's at.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. It's way out of San Francisco. It's kind of out in the middle of nowhere. So that's, I'm sure, part of it.
Oh yeah, 100%. We'll share that list to our social media pages. Again, that was on Arch City Media earlier this week. Another great local media market here in St. Louis. So we'll share that so that you guys can see where the other arenas rank in the area. Still 5-2 Cubs in the bottom of the 6th inning. We're going to take one more break. We're going to come back and talk a little bit about the Olympics. Team USA is rolling right now, and maybe not necessarily in the way you think. We'll be right back here on the Toasted Tavern. Olympics still going on in Paris, France. Our good friend Mason, Blues Fan Reacts, was actually in Paris a couple of days ago. Didn't really get a chance to see anything because he's going across Europe, but did snap some really nice pictures of the Eiffel Tower and a couple other places in Paris. But I tell you what, aside from some of the controversies that have been going on, some of the things going on with the sign and the potability of the water there, I gotta say, I think the Paris Olympics have been absolutely incredible, and it helps that Team USA is doing so well in so many events.
Yeah, that always makes it better when your country is winning and dominating, which Team USA seems to do at the Summer Olympics. But yeah, I think Paris has done a nice job. I'll admit I haven't gotten to watch as much of it as I would like, but from what I've seen, it's been pretty impressive.
And it doesn't help that, most of the day starts at 2 a.m. local time here. So you miss half the day before you even wake up. But NBC, again, does a great job of covering the Olympics, doing the primetime recaps and all that. The one thing that has kind of irked me, and it's actually irked a lot of people across the country, especially volleyball fans, is the frequency that they cut to commercial during the run of play, or missing points here, or kind of missing the ends of sets as well. Obviously, you said you haven't had a chance to watch a ton of it, but is that something you've noticed when you've been watching it as well? And again, why are you missing out? Why are we missing out on some of the better moments of the Olympics because we got to cut to commercial? I understand the money part of it, but there's got to be a way to find out to do something better.
You would think so. Yeah, that's frustrating if you're watching something and you're really into it and you're missing points and you're missing key moments. But yeah, it all comes down to the money and the advertising and everything else. So you would hope they could find a better way to do that. But, it all comes down to the almighty dollar. We all know this.
That it does. That it does. Which games, what events have you been able to see and kind of catch so far?
I've seen a little bit. I've seen a little bit of the track and field stuff. I've seen a little bit of swimming. I caught the first day or so, a little bit of gymnastics, and I've seen just a few minutes of basketball. Just schedule's been kind of crazy. I haven't had a chance to really sit down and watch a whole lot. So, but yeah, I've caught some bits and pieces of stuff.
Well, Simone Biles, absolutely dominant again. She's already picked up a couple of golds. She's going to go tomorrow in a couple of events. She could pick up two more gold medals. Team USA, defended their or picked up the gold in the team meet. The men's gymnastics team took bronze, which was huge because that was the first time, and I can't remember the exact amount of time, but it's been at least 16 years or so since the men gymnastics has medaled, and they did that, picking up the bronze, which was incredible to see. For me, obviously, being a volleyball play-by-play person, I've been watching a ton of volleyball, and beach has been great. All four teams on the men's and women's side advanced to the round of 16. And in fact, today, Hughes and Chang played their first round of 16 match, and Italy took them to the brink, but they were able to advance. Chase Budinger's team had to go through the lucky losers bracket to get into the round of 16, but they're in, so they're seeing a lot of success. Men's and women's indoor teams are both in the quarterfinals as well, so lots of success there. But let's talk a little bit about the basketball side of things, because I know you just love talking about LeBron James and Team USA, but the men's side and the women's side have both been pretty dominant in this tournament so far. And, the men kind of avenged that 1-point victory over South Sudan with a pretty, solid performance as well. Obviously, there's not going to be a team like the dream team that we had in the 90s. It's just not going to happen. But this men's team has shown that they can be really, really good. And it almost feels like they're a shoe-in to win the gold. And I think they are finally in the mindset of, we're going after it, and it's a team instead of individuals.
Yeah, and that's what you need to have. You need to be a team, which is good to hear, because, there were some guys complaining and some rumblings that people weren't happy with their playing time and they weren't starting. And, it shouldn't be about individuals like you said. It should be about representing the country and winning. And, you hope they figure that out and they play as a team and they can win.
Well, and you said you've caught some of the track and field. Noah Lyles today, absolute photo. I mean, it was legitimately a photo finish in the 100 meters today. He won by the skin of his teeth. He didn't lead until he crossed the finish line. That's how tight that race was. At one point, he was in 8th, but he backed up the talk and he ended up taking the gold medal in that one. Absolutely electric. I think I believe the women's relay team set a record as well. So track and field has had its ups and it's had its downs a little bit too. So a couple of gold medal hopefuls have not been able to rise to the occasion either.
Yeah, and that happens. You're gonna have really great stories, and then you have disappointing stories. Some people are gonna come out of nowhere and to win medals, and then some of the favorites struggle, and it's a disappointing Olympics, but that's just kind of part of sports.
And then swimming, the U.S.-Australia swimming rivalry, which has somehow blossomed in the last handful of years, went down to the final race today, which was the women's relay. Both teams coming in had 7 gold medals. The U.S. was by far ahead in the total swimming medal count, but another world record was set today by the women's relay team, and they were able to take the 8th gold medal in swimming for Team USA. And again, they just put on a show. I mean, Katie Ledecky, Tori Husk, and just so many great swimmers. And it's a little interesting because, Ledecky may or may not swim in 2028 in Los Angeles, but there's a lot of really good young swimmers for Team USA that it feels like, again, we've recycled to the next generation, and they're still just as dominant as the group that came before them. I mean, Michael Phelps had some of his records broken by a Frenchman who was absolutely incredible. But for the most part, Team USA has just continued to cycle in just great swimmers year after year, Olympics after Olympics.
Well, and that's what happens when you're so dominant as a sport and you have people like Michael Phelps and Katie Ledecky. Young kids watch that and they see how dominant they are and they want to emulate that. And that's how you keep a program like the swimming program going for as long as you have, because you just have, more and more kids wanting to emulate those guys and keep that going, be the next version of a Phelps or a Ledecky, or, going back to Spinks and all those different people over the years that have been Leganis, all those different guys over the years that America's produced some great swimmers.
They really, really have. It's been absolutely incredible just to see that domination continue. Coming up tomorrow, women's balance beam final is going to be underway at 5:38 in the morning. So if you're up early, definitely check that one out. A couple of men's apparatuses are finishing up as well. Men's round of 16, beach volleyball 7:00. A couple of more events going on as far as beach volleyball. The other men's team will be in action at 10:00. You've got the women's semifinal 3-on-3 basketball, United States versus Spain. The men's team was bounced. And let me ask you this. Jimmer Fredette, he was the star player on the men's 3x3 team. Obviously, he got injured in game 2 and sat out the rest. But what does that say about the Americans' mindset on the 3x3 basketball side of things, that Jimmer Fredette is the star on that team?
That's interesting. That's not the first person you would think of that would be the star in that situation, but got to give Jimmer some credit.
Well, you do, but unfortunately, he got injured in the second game, and Team USA got bounced pretty handily today. 21-6, they lost to the Netherlands, so not so good there. But still got about a week and a half of action left in the Olympics, so plenty of other big-time events. Obviously, track and field is now starting to take the place of the swimming events, so that's going to be hot and heavy as far as what's going on there. And then obviously you've got soccer, volleyball, basketball, all that stuff going on over the next couple days as well. It's been an incredible Olympics so far, and rumor has it that the closing ceremonies and the transfer of the flag from Paris to LA is going to be very, very fun, because somebody has again thrust himself into the festivities to make a name for himself again. Do you know what the story is behind this?
I do not.
So apparently, the one, the only, Mr. Tom Cruise is going to perform some sort of stunt at the end of the ceremony to take the flag from Paris to LA. That's about all I know, but Tom Cruise is going to be the guy.
Huh, that'll be interesting. we know Tom likes to do big stunts in his movies, so I'm sure it'll be a big production.
Yeah, something about base jumping or parachuting. I don't know what exactly it is, but definitely will be something to watch. We can only hope that the closing ceremonies are less controversial than the opening ceremonies. If you got a chance to watch that, yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's all we really need to say about that, because that was definitely interesting.
That's the perfect word to say it without us going into it and getting ourselves canceled.
Right. Yep. Absolutely.
All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up here. Cardinals trailing 6-2 in the top of the 7th against the Cubs. Again, they're going to have to find a way to come back against them. Jordan Steele has gone 6 1/3 now. 3 hits, 2 earned, 1 walk, 5 strikeouts. So Cardinals offense not really putting it together so much today outside of the 2-run home run from Mason Wynn. What do you got coming up this week, Scott? What's on the platter, and what can we expect?
I will be at the ballpark most of the week. Mets game tomorrow, then the Rays in town. That's kind of my week this week, and then high school sports start rolling up here in the next couple of weeks, so that'll add to all of my duties besides what I'm doing with the Cardinals and this, and so things start to get really busy for me again as we roll into these fall sports seasons.
It's the perfect time of year as we get into the fall and high school sports start to get going, especially high school football. College football's on the horizon as well. I know we're working on getting a specific voice in to the show here in the next couple of weeks before the college football season gets going. So make sure you stay to our socials for that, as well as anybody else that we're able to bring into the show. I know we've got Tom Ackerman on tap soon. We'll see when we're able to grab him and get him on the show, but he always brings great insight to everything that we're talking about. So make sure you stick to our socials as we make those announcements, and make sure you come back next Sunday for another episode of the Toasted Tavern. For Scott Tobin, I am Michael Wagenknecht. Have a great night. Have a great week, and we'll see you next Sunday.